With SL Go going away, I know it creates a void for many users, and it's a sad thing for me. But I can only hope that that void creates awareness in someone to create a new SL Go somewhere, somehow.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Drax Dupre. Joe is not with us today. She's busy remodeling 1920s Berlin, and we simply couldn't find a time to tape the news portion with my schedule and her schedule. So you have to unfortunately look elsewhere into the blogosphere for what's going on in Second Life and VR. Just check the links, read Anara Pay, read Road to VR. That's about it. No, I'm kidding. There's plenty more, and they're all good. But today, for the hour, we have Dennis Harper, who was up until April 2nd the senior product manager at OnLive, the cloud gaming company and the makers of SL Go, this marvelous app that let us use old computers to run Second Life. And OnLive is no more. OnLive was purchased by Sony. Their existing products, Cloud Lift and SL Go, were shut down, and all employees were given a 60-day notice. We have Dennis for the hour today about the present and the future of SL streaming. He is going to clarify a few things also that were, well, let's put it mildly, underreported in the media. He will tell us that the petition to Sony to bring back SL Go, which is circulating, is in fact SL going nowhere, and he will also tell us a bit about fusion jazz and what that musical genre has in common with open-ended virtual worlds. I spare you the housekeeping stuff because I'm assuming you know how to get in touch with us and how to show your support for this community radio station. There's a lot of work put into this, and we do it for the love. So thank you, subscribers. Thank you, sponsors. Now, here's Dennis Harper. First, in our conversation we taped a few days ago, I asked him to go back and give us a glimpse into the beginning of SL Go. How did it all start? Who proposed the concept to whom? And all that good stuff. Here is Dennis Harper.
Well, let's see. SL Go started, I think the original SL Go started back in the beginning of 2013, in March. And they started developing it, and a lot of the community was in part of our beta programs at that time. We, distributed it on iPad, and it was going around. We were doing a lot of surveys, seeing if there was a business there. And I came into the project around November of that year, and was sort of brought in to sort of push it out to the public and get it into a real product and make it work. And we did that in I think it was March. It was like a year later, March 2014, and then it came out. It's been in production or been in the public for a little more than a year. So OnLive was always built to be, there's two things about OnLive that are very attractive toward a virtual reality or a MMO kind of a game, and and those things are, one thing, most of these products are extremely graphically intensive, right? It takes a big, powerful computer to play them. And number two, some of them, and Second Life isn't one of these, but some of them take a long time to install. I don't know if you've ever installed World of Warcraft, but it's like 40 gigabytes or something like that. And then it patches itself over. It takes a day to get through this whole thing. And so the idea was that if we wanted to burgeon a little MMO business, right, where we would target these MMOs and say we could provide essentially an instant on experience for you. You could go to our client or to a website and click, boom, and then you'd be playing instantly. And not only that, it would be patched to the most recent level. It would be always the best thing. And so that's why. And then our financier, the guy who actually acquired the company, OnLive, actually went through a bankruptcy in late 2012, and a guy named Gary Lauder came in, acquired it, and Lauder was really interested in working with Rod Humble and making Second Life one of our first premier products on OnLive. So a lot of the credit goes to Gary Lauder, but for starting this whole thing, and because he had a vision that, number one, that there was, there was hundreds of thousands of Second Life customers. Number two, he felt that Second Life is a very graphically intensive application, and that people would pay to experience the real beauty of its full ultra graphics, and where they really couldn't get it normally.
Do you know if the initial conversations were around primarily getting the existing users to offer them this instant on and everywhere deal, or was there talk about, hey, with this way we can actually decrease the hurdle and get new people in? Because that was something that I always thought, is this actually going to bring new people into Second Life? Because we all know the hurdles it's complex and you need obviously more time to invest.
I don't ever think that we thought that this would be targeted at a new user. We had a lot of discussions around this, by the way, but who's our customer and who are we targeting and who they are and where should we go and try to get them. And really it turned out that as you know, Second Life is a difficult experience to get into to begin with. To add another layer of complexity on top of that with this SL Go thing, and in a touchpad, and trying to get to menus, and it would have been a difficult situation for a new user to get into it. So we definitely wanted to target new users. In fact, the first thing we thought of, we said, what we should really target is we should target these landowners and these already monetizing customers that are inside Second Life, right?
The professionals, the people who make a living from SL. Mm-hmm.
They're already paying money, right? So why don't that? So they'll probably be less or less adverse to paying more money for something like SL Go, where they could take it they could take it mobily, and they could check their accounts, and they could do things perhaps where they wouldn't normally do them. And so originally we thought that's our target. We got to hit those people. But really what it turned out, it was almost exactly the opposite. Because it turns out that these landowners and these professionals have super powerful machines. They have server farms that they're set up to do all this stuff, and they don't need SL Go. I mean, maybe they need it mobily, but they really don't really need it mobily. I mean, they do most of their business at home anyway, and so what it turned out is SL Go was really picked up by the community as this supercharger of your computer, right? And so it turned out that person that was our real target was really the basic Second Life user who had an old computer, who could not really afford to upgrade his computer or her computer.
And you also told me that people came to you and said, thank you, I've actually been out of Second Life, and this was a way back in.
Oh, absolutely. We got so much of that. We got so much of people saying, I can't tell you, it's actually made me really, really happy. We would do things in our chat room. Some people would be very, very confused. What is SL Go? How does it work? And what am I supposed to do with it? Is it a viewer? And we're trying to explain to them about what cloud computing is and all this other stuff. And some people aren't as technical as others, obviously. But then walking them through the process, then I'm now log out of Second Life and go log into SL Go and see what you think. And then about a couple minutes later, I'd get these, oh my God, they're like, oh, I can't believe I got my Second Life back again. And there was these sort of like, inspirational moments that would come on these people. It was just amazing and made me really happy.
I ran it parallel in a window with Pro Tools open, with Open Office, writing my script.
It did have its drawbacks. Obviously main things people complained about were, some people said it was fuzzy looking because it did run at 720p. It wasn't your 1080p high resolution, high HD, resolution. It was perfectly fine on a tablet or a mobile device, but if you put it on a big screen TV or one of your big screen TVs, it would look a little fuzzy in some cases. So that was one of the things people talked about. The other was, we had the lack of voice because we didn't have voice chat, and everybody was the number one thing that people had, suggested or that they wanted. They be voice chat, because I had this vision in my mind that people would be walking through a park with their iPads, with their earphones plugged in, chatting to their friends in Second Life, right? I mean, wouldn't that be cool?
So that was on your to-do list, and you told me previously that this was just something where you guys implemented it, I guess, and then the frame rates went boom, totally down, and you just had it on a list for a little bit later to kind of tackle that.
There was some issues with the OnLive client itself. The OnLive service actually offered voice chat from client to client. In other words, I could, if you were my friend in OnLive, I could voice chat to you, and so there was an ability. In fact, it was I kind of kept it on the down low, but you could have actually, if you wanted to friend somebody in the OnLive service who was your SLGo friend, you could have voice chatted to them, but it wouldn't been in world. It would have been through the OnLive service, and that's where people want to voice chat, obviously, because that's where the training is and everything else. So
the reason why I asked earlier about what you said about trying to focus who the customer is, because Rod Humble was at the helm at Linden Lab at the time, and obviously the biggest challenge for any CEO at Linden Lab is how do you get over that stagnation that is still happening in SL. I mean, it's very stagnant, and everybody's trying to solve that puzzle. How do you make it appealing? How do you get people in?
that's interesting, because once we opened up the SLGo island and we were spending a lot of time in world, we had so many visitors and people that come over and then joined our chat room, and because I think it's something in what you say, because it's almost like, oh, here's the new shiny pretty thing, this thing called SLGo. What is it? And they all come over and they all visit and they all chat and they all want to find out what's going on, because there is probably this level of stagnation that's going on elsewhere, right?
It's something that is a whole other discussion that we often have. Is a virtual world like Second Life, is the market just small, and will it ever be bigger? With Philip Rowe still working on High Fidelity and other companies working, how big is the market for a world that provides this blank canvas? Is it just like you and I share a love for fusion jazz? Is that always going to be the small sort of, in the baked potato, maybe 20, 30 people, or is the potential bigger? What do you think as a noob? I mean, you were a noob, you coming in.
I was a noob, and it took me a long time to figure it out, right? And to tell you the truth, I am totally into it now, because someone took me shopping, someone showed me how to groom my avatar, someone showed me all the really cool places to hang out, someone showed me how to dance, someone showed me how to it's all someone showed me. Do you see what I'm saying? I didn't get a tutorial. It was always someone showed me how to do this stuff. And if I hadn't had, to tell you the truth, I had the programmer that was one of the web programmers that I worked with at OnLive, was actually the designer of this SLGo world, and he'd been in world for 5-6 years, right? And so he was a scripter, he was a programmer, and he built this thing from nothing. And if it wasn't for him, I mean, he showed me everything. He sort of led me through and showed me all the really cool things about how Second Life could be. So that was a really interesting way to go. And like I said, I think that some of the initial fallout, I think that there must be a huge churn in Second Life, because essentially people come in, they go, I can't figure this out, and then they'd leave. Right? It's got to be an amazing churn.
That is exactly the conundrum. They have signups. I don't know what the current numbers are, but people do sign up. People go in. They go in for 3 to 5 minutes, and then they leave and they never come back. But you said something that I have that exact same theory, and other people might disagree. But I firmly believe that even if you had the most compelling automated tutorial, HUD-based tutorial, whatever, I think the individual hand-holding in the beginning is really super important. I don't know how to implement it, but I think in order to increase retention, you have to have a live person there that shows you the stuff, because your interests may shift. Your questions may be too complex for an automated tutorial to answer, basically.
It's absolutely right, because let me give you a couple examples or a couple things, and this may be going off topic here, but when we were developing Firestorm for SLGo, I got I talked a lot with Jessica, and she became a real good friend, and did a lot of planning together and otherwise. And she was almost my mentor in a lot of ways in terms of like how I deal with the Second Life community. And she told me, she said, you gotta get in world. She said, that's how we did it. We set up a support area that you could like ring a bell. You could come at any time and people would come and talk to you. If you had a problem, we would be there in world talking to you personally about what happened. And as soon as we did that, we got a huge boost in what we were doing, because she understood that, just like you're saying, it takes a person. The other day, I bought this unicorn as a joke, and I was going to ride this unicorn around for the last days of SLGO. And it was really frustrating because every time I tried to ride it, all of a sudden my character would penetrate and start walking. And so something was going on, and I have no idea what was going on. And I turned off my AO, I turned off all this stuff. I go, what's still going on? So I went to the Firestorm guys, and I said, can you help me through this thing? I can't figure out what's going on. And so they systematically, went through it with me personally, had me take off each piece of my, gear, clothing. And it turned out that my boots had this hidden AO inside them that made, and it was overriding the horse. And so, I would have never have known that if someone hadn't been in world to help me find that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely the key. And it's the key, the value. Let me just add this in terms of purchasing and a relationship with a vendor, for instance. It's a very, very good old-fashioned value, a relationship between the customer and the merchant.
And that's what we did with SLGO, because we realized that SLGO was another level of complexity on top of this already complex thing. And so that's why we set up in World. We said, okay, we're going to help you through this thing. We're going to help you download this thing and understand how you can, sign up. And that's why we did the pay with Linden's thing that we did, because we wanted to make it even easier for these people to sign up. And all of that stuff was actually working really, really, really well, by the way. We got a huge boost right at the end. The chart was going this way, a huge boost. I mean, the curve went from this to like this, and it's really a shame.
So let's go to the present now that we had a little grieving, reminiscing at this funeral. Unfortunately, so Sony came in and purchased the company and basically purchased the patents. Did they let everybody go?
So let's just be clear about exactly what happened, because there's a lot of confusion in the press about Sony. And there's a lot of griefing that's going on with Sony. And there's even an online petition right now to give back to Sony, like give us back SLGO and that sort of thing. Well, the fact of the matter is, Sony never wanted to run the service. They never wanted to have the service. They didn't have any interest in the service whatsoever. All they wanted was our intellectual property, our patents. That's the only thing that they wanted. And once that they purchased those intellectual properties, the service has to cease to exist, because we essentially don't own the rights to use the systems that we are actually operating under. Does that make sense? And so OnLive as a company was not a profitable company. It was turning around. It was actually very close to being a profitable company. And as cloud gaming goes, there's a great article on our blog written by our founder, Gary Lauder. If you go to the OnLive blog, basically saying that how the cloud gaming became very profitable for us. It was like we had margins of like 40 to 80% on what we were doing in cloud gaming. But the fact of the matter is it took us a lot of money to acquire a customer. And so the long-term yield over a customer was not enough to pay for the service. And so, but we were getting really close to that turnaround spot. But unfortunately, the runway had run out for OnLive. And it wasn't like Sony shut the service down. What it was is that we ran out of money. We basically ran out of money, and we couldn't continue the service.
But you didn't see it coming in the sense that you were not told that, hey, we're going to have to sell.
They were pretty clear for a while that the company, that they were looking for a buyer. right? They were looking they were looking to get out of the business, right? And there was a lot of people that came in. I can't name them for you. It's confidential. There were some scenarios where people would have come in and actually continued the service as it is, and would have taken over exactly what we were doing and continued to do what we were doing. That's why it was frustrating for me, especially at the end, because I couldn't tell anybody what was happening because I didn't know. Nobody knew.
And obviously you hoped that somebody would buy it that obviously would continue the service.
That's right. In fact, that's why we were pushing out Pave with Lindens. That's why we were pushing Firestorm on the mobile. I kept doing these things because I was operating under not the assumption, but the hope that another person would come in and want to maintain that service, right? And then we would still have all these things in place and have a good positive growth curve. So unfortunately, that is not what happened. And Sony we all didn't get fired. What happened is something called the WARN Act. I don't know if you know what that is, but if a small company like OnLive is forced to shut down, they have to give all employees a 60-day notice. So it's what's called a working severance. So I'm essentially, all of us are still employed at OnLive for 60 days. If they need us to do things, we should, we're responsible. We're adults. We go in and do what needs to get done.
You can't go on vacation for 60 days right now.
You can't go on vacation, that sort of thing. At the same time, they encourage us to look for other opportunities as well.
So this is an important clarification because actually this morning my wife is a lawyer, and my son was asking if this was a hostile takeover, and it wasn't. But you just clarified. He was fascinated. He loves the word hostile.
This is a shutdown, is what it is, and it's called the WARN. If you just look it up, WARN Act, that's what it is.
You probably cannot disclose it, but I was wondering if Linden Lab were one of the prospective people who were interested or approached.
Linden Lab did talk to us at one point about our streaming service, and I wasn't privy to any particular offer that they put down or that sort of thing, but they were always very interested in our streaming service and how it helped their customers, and they were very interested in it, and they, I think, were particularly interested in whether OnLive would scale to the size of a Second Life, right?
So meaning the concurrency, because explain this real quick. So basically, if you have 50,000 people on at the same time, that means what? I mean, it means you have to run...
It means you have to run 5,000 servers easily, okay? Mm-hmm. There's usually a 10%, 10 to 15% concurrency model, and it actually comes out very... I mean, I've seen these things live and otherwise, and it comes out almost exactly 10 to 15% every time for the amount of users versus the amount of concurrent users that you have to have. So it's always 10 to 15%. So think about Second Life and think about, say there were 100,000 users, you'd have to have a 10 to 15,000 servers that are live. And not only that, but each server is a server. People don't seem to realize that when you're playing SL Go, you have your own server. Nobody is sharing that with you. It's a complete supercomputer in the cloud that you're using.
That's something that I never really understood. But I think you said this in a previous interview that you OnLive owned server farms, because the question is, you guys have to kind of anticipate how many servers do you need. Now the question is, do you purchase them all, or can you then very quickly rent them if the interest explodes?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the answer is for OnLive, we bought everything. We had our own service. We bought all the servers ourselves, and if we anticipated that there was going to be a growth in the service, we would purchase some capacity. But so other companies offer similar services to us that are scalable. Like, for instance, Amazon has this cloud solution called AppStream, and the way Amazon works too is Amazon is a scalable solution. In other words, Amazon has hundreds of thousands of servers all over the world, right? And a lot of them are just sitting idle most of the time when you're not browsing and looking for guitar strings on Amazon or something like that. They're sitting They're sitting idle, right? And so what they've done is they opened up Amazon Cloud Services. Basically, you can rent Amazon servers to do your applications, to hold your storage, to do all sorts of other things, and they're readily scalable. In other words, you pay what you use for. I mean that you use, and they bill you for your usage, and you can set up, you can sort of define what the servers look like, and they can be easily what's called provisioned, which means that they can be mapped to your particular application very quickly, and they can scale out very, very easily.
So this is something that you guys did use occasionally?
No, this is this is a completely different service by Amazon. And if someone was to want to do a similar streaming solution.
Someone like Linden Lab, the makers and people who run a very popular virtual world?
It's possible, but that's their business. But the way I would do it if I was them is I would go to Amazon and I would see I would do an experiment and see if this could work.
But isn't it a completely different thing with a persistent 3D world that can be manipulated in real time by any number of people and running, I don't know, open office or even some sort of streamlined racing game,
It's actually not different, because what you're doing is think about what you're doing in a streaming application is you're running an instance of Second Life, right?
Right.
And that Second Life that's running in the cloud is talking to the Linden servers, right? So all the stuff you're doing in that cloud server is talking to Linden servers. And so all the stuff you do, all the stuff you make, all the stuff you create, all the stuff you save is saved on the Linden servers. And so you can essentially pick up that thing from one server and put it on another one, and you still have the same thing. You still have what you made in, because your creations are in the cloud in Linden servers, not in the cloud servers.
Okay, so Linden Lab was interested, and they wanted to see, does everything explode if we have 70,000, whatever, how many people we have, and then, but then that didn't go anywhere, and then Sony comes in. I mean, this is just a very speculative question. Do you think, and you don't have to answer it if you can't, but do you think that Linden Lab now sits there and goes like, damn, we didn't anticipate that this was going that fast. We were kind of thinking, it's like you're buying a house and then all of a sudden, boom, the house is gone.
Well, what I truly think is that that they were looking at OnLive, and but they were really worried about the scalability, like I said before. And I think that they wanted a solution that would scale to hundreds of thousands of users, right? And unfortunately, OnLive wasn't that solution. So I think that while the OnLive technology probably would have been very, very interesting to them in terms of intellectual property and maybe getting a bootstrapping some sort of system that would be going, I believe that they would really want a more scalable solution to do this.
Okay, but you could have gotten there.
Yes, we
could have gotten to that scalability if you had been given more time to just improve on the service, theoretically.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we could have gone to Amazon, and we could have done different things. In fact, we had projects in motion that would allow us to kind of get off of our own network and go to a more of a flexible cloud solution. So yes, the answer is if we had been given the time, we would have been able to do all of this stuff that they wanted. Now, what I can only hope at this point is that, and believe me, I believe that Linden Lab knows that SL Go has created a void.
I would actually want to throw in this real quick, because I also think what we talked about earlier with the stagnation and a certain perception also of Second Life as a sort of an antiquated thing, that SL Go arguably really brought it into the present by saying, hey, look, this is totally cool, and this runs on any kind of like current cool-looking mobile device. That should not be underestimated, although it may not have brought people in right away in the short term, but just as sort of a public image type of polishing that a little bit, it's valuable.
Yeah, I think that I really think that they understand what SL Go did and how it affected their users. And Ebby is Ebby is great, by the way. He really cares about his users. He really, really does. And I can only hope that, that he strongly considers doing something like this, or that at least an experiment to see whether or not it would be possible for Second Life. I would really caution anybody from going to Sony and asking them to do it. They're never going to get anywhere with Sony. Believe me, if you want to talk to somebody about this, talk to Linden Lab. That's where you're going to get an answer, not from Sony. Right?
You hear that, listeners? Put your energy towards gently pushing Linden Lab to put the pedal on the metal, developing something. But if it were that easy, everybody would have done it.
It's true, and the road there is probably fraught with all sorts of potholes and obstacles, I would imagine. But fortunately, there is talent at OnLive that has been through the process before, and we can help, right?
There is human resources.
There is know-how. Let me put it that way.
The interesting thing is that Gaikai was offering a similar service and was purchased by Sony as well. And there was a beta that I was part in, and I have to dig up these old screenshots, where Second Life very briefly Linden Lab experimented with Gaikai, and it had Second Life running in a browser. It was, compared to SLGo, it was incredibly crude, but that was 5 years ago almost. What is your assessment of Gaikai in relation to SLGo? And then my second follow-up question, why did Sony purchase something that they already kind of have for their PlayStation Now service?
Again, I should refer you back to the article that Gary wrote, right, on our blog. And what you'll see is he has a chart there. And Sony purchases Gaikai, and immediately after Sony purchases Gaikai, there's huge negative press that comes out, because Gaikai as a service does not compare in any way favorably to OnLive. OnLive was the industry leader in this area, and probably was way out of Sony's range in terms of purchasing the service itself at that time. And so they bought Gaikai, and the press started complaining about it.
Let me briefly say, because I'm looking at this article, and there is a curve, the cloud gaming hype cycle, and at the top Sony buys Gaikai, and then pew, the curve goes down because things were promised and they just didn't deliver.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. They promised, distribution and all of this other stuff, and they promised, low latency, and they didn't get it. And they promised high quality graphics, and they didn't get it. And they promised all of this stuff, and not only that, but it costs a ton of money. It was like, $50 a month to play games for something like that, 60 maybe, or something like that. So it was just off the charts bad press, right? So Sony got Gaikai and sort of left OnLive kind of isolated, right? We were the industry leaders clearly in this space, but we were kind of left to flounder. In other words, if we couldn't build a business, if we couldn't get a business thriving and get a lot more customers, we were going to go down. And so it was a matter of them just waiting until the point where they said, okay, now the reason they got our patents and the reason they got our IP is because they can improve their service now and make it up to par with what OnLive was using this technology that they just purchased. And hopefully then that those complainers and those whiners that were complaining about Gaikai won't complain anymore. Selling these patents to Sony, what we can hope is that they are going to really take the torch for cloud gaming, right? And that they're going to make it into something that's really, really, really cool, and that it's going to be low latency and everybody's going to love it, and it will be, and if that's the case, that's going to be good for cloud gaming in general, and that means that other people who try different kinds of cloud gaming experiences will have more success. For instance, if someone tried something with Amazon, or somebody tried something with somebody else, there's other providers, that not just Amazon, that do this kind of thing as well. So we can hope that we've sort of broken through this this curve, right? Cloud gaming is something that's not possible. It is possible. SL Go proved it's possible, right?
It's possible, but I'm just realizing that it's the same kind of adoption anxiety, possibly like it is with streaming music. I just heard a story how I think Spotify has less than 10 million users. You know, people are not willing to, I guess, give up a title that they hold in their physical hands, even if it's just a CD or a DVD, I guess. I don't know.
Right. I mean, but if you really look at it, though, gaming is going the same way as CDs and music and DVDs and films and Netflix and all the rest of the stuff in your cable. It's going the same way. And it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of bandwidth. It's a matter of technology before we really get there. I think that perhaps OnLive was a little ahead of its time, but I don't think it's a lot ahead of its time. I think if we were given another year or two, we could have turned the corner and had an actually incredibly viable business.
Now, our listener Loki Elliott, one of the great content designers in Second Life and experienced designers, I might add, tweeted me this morning. I have a theory. Sony bought them to close them because OnLive could have gone huge when Apple releases the App Store on Apple TV. OnLive would have suddenly been the only console game streamer for Apple TV users. I would have been able to use SL Go on Apple TV, playing on my 42-inch TV with a Bluetooth gamepad.
Well, he would have. That's absolutely true. But let's talk about the Big Apple for just a little bit. We, as a service, OnLive has been trying to get an OnLive app into the App Store for a year, 2 years, right? And every time they look at the OnLive game service, and it's just okay, think of it. You have your iPad, right? And you hook a little controller to it, like a Bluetooth controller to it, and you have access to hundreds of high-quality streaming PC games, right? Who could not want that? I mean, that's an amazing thing, right? Well, you know who doesn't want it? Is Apple, okay? They don't want it. You know why? Because they can't control it. In other words, what you're seeing on your device is not a game, it's a video stream. And we can change that video stream whenever we want. In fact, we could change what games are offered. In fact, we could change it into a game that actually takes money, in like a free-to-play game, like which you can monetize off of, which they can't then get a piece of, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
And including, and we talked about this earlier, when you or previous interview, when in Second Life, obviously you can go and have you can purchase and money changes hands, and Apple is also not getting a cut.
That's right, because it's user to user, and they can't really get into that economy. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, if I purchase a land or object from you, and I pay in lindens, how are they going to? What are they going to charge me tax on that? Or do you see what I'm saying? Or they can't get into that economy. That's not something that they have a part of. So, which is why SL Go was allowed on the iPad and not, but this gaming service was not allowed because there was too many holes in the gaming service for them to swallow. They couldn't take the fact that we could change it at any moment, and they had no control whatsoever over the content that was coming out through the thing. But so who loses is the Apple audience loses because they have such a wonderful experience on an iPad, right?
How Apple is still fascinating how Apple turned from the image of the liberator to Big Brother himself.
The fact that every app has to be reviewed and approved by a board, that they can't even that is alone should tell you, right, about Apple.
Do you get an email back from them where it summarizes what you just said? We cannot approve this app because XYZ, or how does that work?
I cannot tell you. I've been through this process it's been over a year that we've been trying to get this thing through to Apple. And it went through 4 or 5 different reviewers and resubmissions. And they told us at one point that our subscription model was flawed, and they have to change the subscription model. And then they let us down this path that we actually did everything they asked us to do, okay, in order to release this thing. And then finally it was in this, and then I got this really cryptic message from somebody one day, and then they said, your app is going into extended review. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I've never heard of that. And I talked to all these people. I go, do you know what extended review is? And they're like, no, I've never heard of that before. And then it was like a month, 2 months later, and I was bugging and I'm like, what's going on with my app? And then finally I get this call, a direct call from somebody at Apple. And they were saying, we're sorry, we can't approve your app. We don't allow streaming game apps in our service. Okay, this is what they said. I mean, that was it. We don't allow streaming game app. And I didn't say, what about SL Go? Because I didn't want them to know that was a streaming game app.
Is the process, your interaction with Apple for this approval process, is it really, I mean, can you pick up the phone? Do you have any kind of privilege to talk to people? Or are you just like us who purchase something in the iTunes store?
You have as much as me. What it is it's completely anonymous. Okay, you cannot. There's nobody to contact. There's nobody to go for until you're in the review process. And then you're in the review. If you're under review process, you might get a name of somebody. Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm looking at your game, right, or something like that. And you don't have, but you can't contact them. You submit this whole review portal that you have to go through, and all of the interaction is done online through this review portal. There's no emails, there's no nothing. You don't know who these guys are. It's just completely anonymous. To get a call from them, by the way, unheard of. No one calls you from Apple and tells you your app is rejected. You don't know who the reviewer is, and the fact that SL Go got approved means that it probably went through a reviewer that didn't care. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, they said, well, okay, we'll let this economy thing go, and we can't do anything about it, and they just let it go, right?
Let's wrap this up. Everybody's talking about virtual reality, virtual worlds. We sometimes call it the metaverse wars. Facebook purchased Oculus. Linden Lab is doing the next generation virtual world. Philip Rosia has High Fidelity. Yahoo purchased Cloud Party. Sony has a VR headset, the Sony Morpheus, tied to the PlayStation. Now they have a cloud service. Do you think that they might build a cloud-based virtual world? I mean, they also shut down Sony Home, which I've never been in there, but people say it's super lame.
Yeah, it was lame.
So do you think like there's a possibility that Sony wants to be in that, one of the big players of supplying the future metaverse?
I think that with the purchase of these OnLive assets, that they are in a really good position to own the cutting edge of cloud-based delivery systems, of streaming applications, right? And what you should realize is a lot of people getting into this space right now, which is good news, right? Because it means it's viable. It means all of a sudden, maybe you go to a Sony, or maybe you go to an Amazon, or maybe you go to some other service out there that provides these streaming services. And so what it means is that they can make cloud streaming viable for everybody in the whole public, and which means that the kinds of applications like SL Go will become easier to make and easier to access, right?
I'm just curious if they want to kind of build their own virtual world and run it. This is a discussion Joe and I always have, it's obviously a huge headache to run the gaggle of diverse, crazy people that we are as Second Life residents. And you might, if you could choose your business, it's probably a lot easier to run a simple game that people play and not feel that kind of ownership.
What I think about Sony is that Sony is a game company too. I mean, they have a game division, and they have had virtual worlds before. They've had EverQuests and the other like, and they have had a measure of success in that kind of area. But to do a virtual world that's open-ended, like Second Life, I don't know if that's in their portfolio right now. I don't know what that is, and I I would look to smaller companies to do more of a Second Life kind of a copy. I know that there's a few out there right now of ex-Lindens perhaps that are using their know-how to go build some of these worlds, and so I would look at them to continue the dream of those kinds of virtual worlds. I don't think Sony's going to be the person, and that's why I say, stop the silly petition. It's not going to work. It's it's like a little mosquito on the butt of Sony trying to nag them. I don't know.
That completes the circle in the sense that we're here with the comparison of open-ended virtual worlds being essentially the fusion jazz of gaming. It's incredibly gratifying to listen to that stuff, but nobody cares.
Nobody cares. And if you try to explain it to them, they're like, "What?" Like, why? It sounds like noise to me.
It sounds like elevator music is even worse. That's like, oh, they play that stuff in the hotel. No, they don't. That's smooth jazz. Right?
Oh,
People
my God.
don't even know the kind of delineate between really good fusion and
I'll tell you, not even Pandora can do it. Okay, I swear to God. I swear to God. I try to set up these stations that have these like massive smoking fusion jazz, and then Kenny G comes on the next.
You stumped Pandora with it. It's impossible. Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is to that.
Make a playlist in Spotify. Okay.
So final comment.
Final comment.
Please, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of SL Go. It was a great ride. I learned so much about Second Life through all of you. Made some great friends. Extremely sad for me to go and not be in World or not offer this stuff to you. I'm hoping that it can continue in some way, shape, or form through someone else. I would say that just generally thank you. Thank you very much for all the great times.
All right, that was Dennis Harper, formerly Senior Product Manager at OnLive, now out there in the world playing more fusion jazz bass, having more time to do that possibly, and of course he has more time to hang out in Second Life and drink virtual schnapps in 1920s Berlin. Maybe he's going back into the industry in some or other capacity. I don't know. The future will tell. I want to personally say thank you, Dennis and team, for making this awesome product. And we wish you all the best in the future. And listeners, I think what you can do is to not only show your appreciation by posting a nice anecdote, how SLGO changed your Second Life for Dennis to read, but also perhaps nudging Linden Lab ever so slightly to pursue maybe a cloud streaming solution for Second Life or for the next generation virtual world, or both. Perhaps they are looking into it. I have no idea. I do believe, though, that if we all make sure that Linden Lab hears us loud and clear how important SLGO was and how important a cloud streaming solution as part of a virtual world service is to you personally, and why, perhaps they would prioritize the development of something like that. I don't know how difficult it is, but maybe they prioritize it more than they otherwise would. By the way, Daniel Voyager has a great blog post I will link to, The Brief History of SLGO. Read it, and shed some tears. It is okay. It's fine. So that's it for the show. Joe will be back next week. In the meantime, if there's not enough Drax for you out there for the weekend, Safia Widdershins and Elric Merlin interviewed me on their excellent Designing Worlds show, and I got an opportunity to go into sort of my motivations, why am I doing this, and the video series, and I also talk about the process a little bit, about the workflow and what work is involved. And I hope that this might be inspiring for others out there to pursue something similar, just to tell stories behind the avatars and get those stories out there. Everybody can do it. If I can do it, everybody can do it. It's just a lot of work. So you have to have that commitment. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, have a great weekend, everyone. We're going out today with music from, with fusion jazz featuring Dennis Harper on bass with his band Espresso. This is a tune called Big Sur. And isn't it interesting that the SLGO commercial was partially shot in Big Sur? I have such fond memories of that shoot, and we drove down to Big Sur. And okay, I'll shut up. I'm gonna drink a glass of wine, log on to SLGO, and reminisce some more before the screen goes black. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend.
All right, Dennis. So that was Big Sur. That's a pretty good song.
Yeah, I like that song. I wrote it,
What, a bass player who writes music? That is unheard of.
Yeah.
All right, there's Sting.
Well,
I give you that.
but I was trained in music, like you, so we did take composition. So
that is awesome. Do you have a song that's called Pebble Beach?
we have one called Second Wind, which is a really good song.
Second Wind.
Maybe SL Go will have a second wind of some sort. Maybe. What do you think?
I think that would be the best news for all the listeners. And we have 5 minutes left in the show. Let's play Second Wind then.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, Stitcher, Fateware by Damien Fate, Giza Creations, Arrows Avatars, Maven Homes, Madbee Productions, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Ison, Caravel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Loki Elliott, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Abranimations, Blue Moon Enterprises, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar, DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.
Okay, Khalil, you tried SL Go when it first came out on the tablet that we got from On Live. So what tablet was that?
Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1.
What did you think? Do you remember when you first tried SL Go? How did you like it?
It was pretty good, just some stuff was not that good.
Yeah, but what was that stuff?
It's kind of hard to recall because it's been over
It's been a year.
3/4 of a year.
Yeah, that is a long time.
Yeah, I know. It's actually a phenomenon for kids. Years are longer than for adults.
Really?
Yeah. Well, they seem longer.
Ugh, these kids. These kids. They have so much time. And what do they do with their time? No, that's off topic.
Be awesome.
I know.
Unlike you.
Well, that's the job of parents, I guess.
And unlike Tom.
But it was pretty nice for On Live to give you that Samsung tablet for reviewing. They gave it to you.
Yeah.
You were able to keep it.
Yeah.
Well, and what do we say in the Drax family?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, spoiled little.
Look who's talking.
I'm not spoiled. I
Yeah,
didn't.
you are.
With what?
You have like 7 computers.
Yeah, but I use them for work.
Not all of them.
Yeah, not all of them all the time, but I need them. Do you need this Samsung tablet?
Yeah.
For what?
Being awesome.